What's up again, friends? Another Skitzo rant here. Today I'd like to talk about what it's like being someone who, at least I consider, mixed race. So I'm half Jewish, half Caucasian. So that has a certain divide between your personalities or understanding. And so, some people might not consider Jews their own ethnicity or whatever, or it's a religion or whatever, but we're going to ignore all of that, at least for the purposes of this talk, and just accept my classification, if you will. Certainly, I'm pretty sure this applies to other people too that aren't quite so indifferent about race, but I'd like to talk about actually the negative aspects of mixed race and how, lost identity and how having no identity from that feels in comparison to, say, someone who has a full-fledged identity or culture hidden behind them. So, and a lot of people will say, Caucasians don't have a culture, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's just, you're welcome to your own opinion. You can agree to disagree on a lot of these factors. Like, Judeo-Christian culture is one of the monoliths of, all culture. It's been spread across the planet in untold places. I'm just not accepting that for now. And since it's my YouTube channel, I can do whatever I want. So I'm not even going to address that any more than that. If you believe that, well, you're in the wrong place. But anyways, so as someone who came from a mixed race background, there's a lot of lost identity there. And what does that feel like as far as a religious aspect, for instance? If I were to become religious, let's say, if I was drawn to something like that, what does that personify itself? Like, I was baptized, so can I become a Christian? Do I have one of the 40,000 souls in the Sinai wandering inside of me? Is it gonna work? Because it doesn't really make sense. You don't actually know. And it's the same thing if you're a white and black mixed race person. Are you an Uncle Tom? Are you, all of these potential issues that come, and this is basically an argument against race mixing, just on a fundamental and cultural level. You sort of lose this grandiose link through history between people when you're mixing different ethnicities, and the cultural aspects of that, and that person personally understanding where they belong or what they have to do. It's an incredibly selfish decision, I think, to proceed with something like that, and is another argument for anti-natalism, in my opinion. And so, how do you manage to navigate through life without a firm understanding or firm basic foothold or grasp on what your culture is, where you belong, in a sense, in the ethos, and even spiritually? How does someone who, is some sort of golem hybrid spawn manage to do this? And my bloodline probably dies with me, at least, hopefully, this mixed, a Mary Golem mutt, even though it's trying to pollute the gene pool in America. Let's be clear here, what it is. But even taking that into consideration, how do you proceed? What are you trying to accomplish with your goals in the world? I have two very distinct goals that I could even consider. I can consider a pro-Zionist position where I'm trying to advance Zionism, let's say, and trying to, make greater Israel, get Laban Scrum, take over, all the kingdom of Judea. Is that where I'm supposed to go with my, political and understanding of the world? Or am I supposed to be, someone who comes from a Judeo-Christian background and spreads, the word of Christendom through the entire rest of the world and continue to convert them? Let's say if you're not looking at this just from a religious angle, for just for relationships, for anything, should I get a shabib and try and find a cute little Jewish girl even though I'm a half-breed? Do I want to try and find someone and then just make more? What happens if I want to make a Eurasian mess? Can I produce an Elliot Rodgers then if I were to go about it? What an incredibly selfish and horrible thought to even bring something like that into, for one, the world is very uncaring just to begin with, and for two, putting someone at just a genetic disadvantage just because you have elected that, you've decided that you wish to make more. I don't know. It's pretty crazy, at least to me, to think about that. And yeah, I mean, as someone who is clearly, like, genetically deficient. Like, I'm a midget, I'm ugly, like, especially being born into these circumstances. Like, it probably would have been better for the world if I hadn't existed, just mathematically speaking. Even if, I've paid my tax dollars, I've contributed more than probably the average person or whatever. I'm retired at 35. All of these benefits, it's still, even with all of that, let's say best case scenario, it still is probably a net negative for the world that God has allowed me to live another day, and now I've made it everyone's problem, right? Sort of opinion. Ooh, tummy rumbling. ASMR tummy rumbling. I should put the 3DO on it so you can hear, but nah. But anyways, so if you're someone that's in that kind of position, it doesn't feel like there's a right answer for how to proceed or how to navigate situations like this, or a greater understanding of things, or even to, like, what community do you want to identify with, right? For instance, the Jewish fundamentalists will not accept me, obviously, because I didn't come out of a Jewish womb. There's no way to tell if I have a spirit of the Sinai that entered into me before the valley of death, right? It's impossible to know that. And that's just from a religious perspective, or that Orthodox Jewish community, let's say, right? So a Shabib, maybe or maybe not, is out of the question there. And then there's also, the Judeo-Christian sort of relationship, right? Because my lineage is, half Christ killer. So there's always that awkward thing. And finding anything about that on the internet, like religion or where to go or how to understand yourself in a religious philosophy as a mixed race person, is just completely beyond the pale, So especially I grew up in a purely atheistic household too, so like I've just gotten to trying to understand this stuff in my later years in life, like nowadays. And so, it's just, where do I go from here as far as that begins? And it's a really deep question. I've been asking myself and trying to understand it for a long time, and it plays into a lot of the other, like, big questions I have that I don't quite comprehend, right? I'm pretty set and sure on the certain universal global values, let's say, for instance. So for one, I don't believe any type of killing is wrong. Abortion is wrong. Eating meat is wrong. Like, period. Just any sort of violence, I think, is just inevitably incorrect, like, factually. Unless it's political violence, in which case terrorism is delicious, and I consume it. That's a joke, in case you're my NSA agent or the assigned FBI guy watching me. You should see the look on that guy's face when he opens his phone in the morning and sees what I've been searching. But anyways, and just thinking about, like, it's still just so awe-inspiring to try and place yourself, and, at the end of the day, it's probably, like, for instance, these half-breeds or whatever, all of them are going to have to, like, just go through life and try and figure out something that makes at least some semblance of sense, or some greater, like, organization to identify with, rather than anything associated with it, or even creating an organization, right? Instead of trying to, fit a square peg into the round hole that is the world, because the world is not designed around that type of thinking, and certainly the, progressives and all of their nonsense isn't going to address an issue like this. For one, they would rather just not have the conversation. Like, most of the consequences of their ridiculous actions, they would rather just not talk about it. So, yeah, it's kind of a depressing spot to be in, a depressing way to think about it. But there's really no solution after you've been born and raised. But yeah, I guess there is one solution, but it's not something you can talk about on YouTube. And that might be the ultimate best choice for certainly the individual and the world itself. But at present, I see no reason to go about that. Maybe that'll change in the future. And yeah, I don't see how to make this all fit. It seems like, and trying to research, like, religion on the internet is just unfathomably impossible. Like, the fedoras of, the recent years have made it such an ironic meme, trying to navigate any sort of discussion or understand anything about that on the internet. What a wall of propaganda we'll call them proto-leftists turned out to have made. It's kind of a shame, even back in those days, I didn't see how much of a threat those people were and their ideas were. I wish the world had handled those people like they should have, and a lot of this leftism garbage like it should have. Yeah, but, you know, it's a tale as old as time. Hindsight is 2020, and looking towards the future, at least on this topic, or trying to find your place in the world as someone that really has no categorical belonging. It's a big yikes, and I'm going to leave you with that, friends. If you have any ideas about fitting in as a weirdo or any other mixed race ideas, let me know. I have a feeling that the answer, at least on a spiritual and intellectual level, is there is none. It's just not supposed to happen, and you should not continue your lineage.